Okay, thank you very much, class, and welcome to another session on business economics. So we are going to continue from where we stopped the other day. Let me share my screen. Okay, let me just okay. Okay, so any question from last week? Any question from last week?
Class, any question from last week? Okay, I think there's no question. So you can proceed.
Okay, okay, no problem. Okay, so today we are coming to continue from where we stopped last week. And last week we're looking at I think the last part was on the looking at taxes and changes in supply. So just to quickly summarize the last week discussion. Last week we realized that once there is an introduction of tax, what happened? We realized there was we realized there was decrease in supply. Okay, so you see that we should have this as quantity, this as price. Okay, so we have this as demand, we have this as supply. So this give us the quantity demanded one, and this give us the quantity demanded two. Okay, so this is the supply without the tax. So once government introduced the tax, imposed the tax, we realized that the supply curve moved upward to denote the new supply curve with the introduction of what? With the introduction of the taxes. So overall effect was what? An increase in price. Overall effect was an increase in price of what? Of cement from P1 to P2, and a decrease in quantity from Q1 to what? To Q2. And we saw how that happened. I think quantity was 21 and it's decreased to 18. I can't remember price. I think price was 36 and it increased to 48 or so. Now, this is the market for cement. Okay, so this is the cement demand. This is cement demand and supply dynamics. Okay, so this is the effect on the what? On the on the price. Okay, the equilibrium price and quantity for cement. So the overall effect is what? An increase in price. Okay, and a decrease in quantity. Remember, this is for cement. Now, the last question that we had was how does the imposition of this particular tax, okay, affect the real estate market, affect the real estate market? And here what we want to see is we are looking at this particular good, which is what? The cement market, how that affects the imposition of the tax, how that particular imposition of the tax is affecting the what? The goods, the real estate or the housing what market. And you realize that cement as a key input is a what? Is complementary good, because cement is used in the production of what? Blocks or in building houses. So once there is an increase in the price of what? Of cement, as we can see here, we expect something to be done in the housing what? Market. So this is the cement, the dynamics in the cement market. What will be the dynamics in the what? In the housing market. So let's look at the effect of this particular, you know, imposition of the tax effects on the housing market. So if you look at the effect on the housing market, still we will have our demand here. This is price, this is quantity. Remember, this is the housing market. So all things being equal, we have this as demand for housing. Okay. We have this as what? Demand for housing. And we have this as what? As supply of what? As supply of housing. So this is demand for housing and this is supply of housing. So this is the price of a unit, okay, and this is the quantity of another what of another unit. This is the price of the house, and this is the quantity of the house. This is the supply of houses, and this is the demand. Now we realize that the increase in the tax or the imposition of the tax increased the price of what? Cement. And by increasing the price of cement, it means that a key input in the production of what? Of a housing, okay, would be affected, which is what? The cement. So an increase in the price of cement, which is a complementary good, will affect the supply of housing because people will no longer be building. So once there is that increase in the price of what? Of cement, we expect the what? The supply of housing to do what? To fall. Remember, this is not this is not the supply of cement. This is the supply of what? Housing. So we have the demand and supply of what? Cement that we have, and how that affects, the housing what? A market. So because there is going to be a shift in the supply curve, because the increase in the price of house will mean that once you want to build house, well, the increase in the price of cement will mean that once you want to build a house, you would have to buy what? The cement at a higher price. And from the law of demand, if the price is high, then you reduce the quantity. Okay. So in this particular case, and from the law of demand, you reduce the quantity. Okay. In this particular case, we have the supply of what? The supply of the price of cement actually what? Increasing. So what will be the effect on the supply? And will there be an effect on the demand? So in this particular case, will people continue to do what? To build the houses if the price of cement is actually increased. In terms of supply would what? Would fall because people will no longer be building houses. So in this particular case, the supply of housing, okay, this particular supply curve will shift to the what? To the left. So this is the supply curve for housing. So you realize that the supply of what? A housing, okay, will reduce, and then the price of a typical house would what? Would increase. So the effect of the imposition of the overall tax on the real estate market in the price of what? A house, and a decrease in the what? In the supply of what? Of house, and a decrease in the supply of houses, as we can see, and a decrease in the supply of houses, and a decrease in the supply of houses. So if you are asked to explain that, that is typically how you do that in with the aid of what? Of a diagram. Alternatively, there can also be a situation where you look at goods that are complementary like this one. So for instance, if you are looking at the production of shoes, maybe leather shoes, which demands the use of a key input, which is leather. So as people are increasing the demand for maybe meat production, that is killing cows, you have more of what? Of the leather that you use to do what? To that you will use to produce that particular key input. So for instance, if you are talking about leather shoes, if you are talking about leather shoes or leather markets, and there is going to be what? An increase in the supply of what? So for instance, during Eid, we have loss and loss of animals that are being killed. So we produce the animal hide. So under normal circumstance, we will have this as the this as the let me begin with this one. We will have this as the demand, right? And then this as the supply. So this is the supply, okay, and this is the demand. Now we have this as the quantity demanded, and we have this as the price. We have this as the price. We have this as the price. Now, remember we are talking about leather shoes here, but the key but the key input used in producing the leather shoe is what? Is the leather itself. Is the leather itself. Okay, so this is the demand and supply of leather. Is the leather itself. This is the demand and supply of what? Of the leather. But you realize that demand for leather, remains constant. But because we want more meat, we kill more animals. Okay, and once you kill more animals, you produce more leather. So in this particular case, what will happen to the supply of what? Of leather. Supply of leather would what? Would increase. Supply of leather will increase. So you realize that supply of leather will increase, even though you do not really need the leather itself. You are looking for what? For meat. But because it's complementary, once you produce this one, you have to get this particular one. So which is what? Is a byproduct. So this is the new supply curve for what? For for leather. So you realize that this would be the quantity supply for leather. And because we are now producing it more, the price will fall. So in the interim, you will have an decrease in the price of what? Of leather, and then an increase in the what? In the supply of what? An increase in the supply of what? An increase in the supply of leather. An increase in the supply of what? Of leather. Now, this is the leather market. If you transfer this to the leather shoes market, let's say the shoes market, what is going to happen? In the shoes market, remember we have this quantity, we have price. So we have this as what? Demand for shoes. And we also have this as what? Supply of what? Supply of shoes. We have this as supply of shoes. So here in the shoes market, we will have this as quantity demanded, and we have this as what? As price of shoes. Remember, because we have more supply of the input, which is what? Which is the leather, what will happen to the supply of what? The production of what? Shoes. Remember, demand remains constant, but supply would what? Would increase. Demand will remain constant and supply would what? Supply would increase. So in this particular case, the supply of shoes would also what? Would also increase. The supply of shoes would also what? Increase. So you realize that when it increases, it means the same demand because demand remains constant. And in this case, supply of shoes actually increases. Supply of shoes increases from Q1 to Q2, whilst the price of shoes actually what? So in the shoes market, the overall effect on the excessive supply of what? Meat, or the excessive supply of what? Leather, okay, would mean that price of shoes will what? Would fall, and then quantity of shoes would increase. So if we do not consume the leather as will, if we do not use the leather that comes with the production or the killing of the processing of the meat, if we do not use that particular leather or hide as willy or banner, okay, we will have more supply of what? More supply of the leather that will be used to produce more what? More shoes. At what prices? At cheaper what prices? So you realize that if we do not compete for the consumption of what? The consumption of what is the name? The hide, okay. In the scheme of affairs, we expect to have higher production of what? Of shoes, and at lower what price. So in some question, I can ask you, how does leaving the consumption of Ghana or this hide, the leather, because once you are consuming it, you are competing with the manufacturers of what? Of shoes, because they need more of that leather to produce, shoes. And if you are consuming it, it means that they will have to compete with you, for their input. Once you do not eat it and more of the shoes or more of the leather are produced, okay, you realize that overall effect will be a reduction in the price of what? Of leather shoes. And the reduction in the price of leather shoe would have mean that your purchasing power has increased, which will of course improve on your overall societal when basically your income has increased. So you should know the various dynamics. You should know the various dynamics. Okay. Now today's particular lecture is actually going to be on a new topic that I'm going to today. I want to conclude on this demand and supply issue. We are going to look at what issues on the elasticity. Okay, maybe before we do that, let's look at this. Before we do elasticity, let's look at a situation where we have a mismatch. A situation where we have mismatch between demand and supply. So we are looking at a situation where we have disequilibrium. We are looking at a situation where we have disequilibrium. Now, if we pick a key, well-behaved demand and supply and supply function, which we have this quantity, we have this as what? As price. Now, this is demand, which we all know. This is supply, which we also know. Now, when the market is at equilibrium, it means that the demand will be equal to what? Supply. So this is equilibrium. When you go down, we have equilibrium quantity. When you go towards the price axis, we have the equilibrium what? We have the equilibrium price. We have the equilibrium price. In this particular equation, or in this particular market, demand is equal to what? Supply. It means that suppliers are happy, demanders are what? At happy. But if there is a situation where demanders are not happy or suppliers are not happy, it creates a situation where we say there is what? Disequilibrium in the market, or there is a mismatch or homogeneity in the supply and demand side what conditions. So where there is a disequilibrium, it means that there is a heterogeneity in the demand and supply side what conditions. So for instance, if we have maybe a particular price, say P2, remember P2 is lower than what? Than P what? P1. In this particular case, because it's lower, what will happen to the supply? Supply would fall because at lower price, less is supplied. And what about the demand side? Demand will rather what? Increase because at lower price, more is what is demanded. In this particular case, let's look at what the supply side. Now, if you trace this to hit the supply curve and then trace it downwards, you will get quantity supplied, which is what? Q2. What about the demand side? You trace it to hit the demand curve, then you trace it down. This will give you the demand side, which is what? Quantity demanded what? 3. In this particular case, there is no equilibrium. So there is what? Disequilibrium, because the quantity supplied is different from the quantity demanded. Where? Okay. Where? So let me just denote, this one is the same thing as the quantity supplied. And this one is the same thing as the quantity what? Demanded, as you can see. And this is the equilibrium what? This is the equilibrium quantity. This is the equilibrium quantity. In this particular case, you will realize that your quantity demanded, which is what? QD, okay, as you can see here, QD, which is here, is exceedingly higher than your quantity what? Supply side, which is what? QS, which is QS, because more will be needed than how much is what? Supplied. More will be needed than how much is what? Is supplied. So in this particular case, remember we said at equilibrium, the quantity supply or quantity demanded should be equal to the quantity what? Supplied. But in this particular case, the two are not what? The same, which means there is this equilibrium in the system. There is this equilibrium in the system. Now, in the presence of this equilibrium, you realize that price, okay, price will not be the same for both the demand side and then the supply side, because demanders for equilibrium, the two should be the same. In this case, you realize that quantity demanded is more than the quantity what supply, which means that people actually need more of the goods than is what is being supplied. So which means there is excess what demand. There is excess what demand. There is excess demand. There is excess demand. If there is excess demand, it also means there is what? There is shortage in the system. There is shortage in the system or in the market. There is shortage in the market. Why is there a shortage in the market? Because price, okay, because price, there is shortage in the market because price, as we can see, which is what P2 price, is what is less than the equilibrium price. Price is less than the equilibrium price. So anytime the market price, so please note, anytime the market price, okay, is less than the equilibrium price, is less than the, please note, is less than the equilibrium price, okay, demand would be what? More. Demand would be more than what? Would be more than supply, which means that there would be what? Excess demand, which means that there will be excess demand. And by being having excess demand, it means there will be what? Existence of what? Of shortage. The existence of shortage, okay, in the market. So as you can see, demand is far more than what? Supply. So in this particular case, at P2, there is what? Disequilibrium. And that disequilibrium specifically is what? Is shortage. So you may want to know, quantify that amount of what? Shortage in the market. So in this particular case, the excess demand or shortage in the market, the excess demand or shortage in the market would be how much is being demanded, which is what? QD, would be what? The quantity demanded, would be the quantity demanded, which is QD, minus how much is being what? Is being supplied, which is what? QS, minus how much is being supplied, which is what? QS, minus how much is being supplied, which is what? QS. So you realize that if, say, here is 7, if, say, here is 7, which is quantity demanded is 7, and quantity supplied, because it has reduced, is 4, which means that the amount of shortage in the market, okay, which means the amount of shortage in the market will be what? 7 minus what? 4, which will be what? 3. So which means that there is shortage of what? 3, maybe 3 kilograms or 3 bags of whatever goods that you are looking at. So in the presence of shortage, it means that the market is not what? Cleared, which means the market is not cleared, or the market is what? Unstable, because demand is not equal to what? Supply. Demand is not equal to what? Supply. So for the market to be stable, or for the market to clear, it means that for you to be at equilibrium, in this particular case, what should happen? Because remember, price is less than what? The equilibrium price. And because it's less than the equilibrium price, we have what? Shortage in the what? In the system. So what you are looking at here is what? Shortage. So this is shortage. So what we are looking at here is what? A shortage. So this, the entire this side is what? A shortage. So what will happen what should happen if we want to move to the equilibrium? If we want to clear this particular shortage in the market, 2 ways, but one way is for this particular market price, the prevailing market price of what? The prevailing market price of what? Of P2 to do what? To increase back to what? To P what? To P1, back to P1. So which means that in the presence of shortage, for the market to clear, or for us to do what? To move back to the equilibrium, market forces will put what? Pressure on the price to do what? To increase. Because before you increase, before you move back to equilibrium at P1, the price would have to revert to what? To the equilibrium price. And before it reverts, it has to do what? It has to increase. So if there is shortage in the market, market forces, okay, will put pressure on the what? On the markets, okay? That's what Adam Smith calls the invisible hand. It will put pressure on the market to do what? On the market price to increase back to the equilibrium what? price. Now, let's look at a situation where we have the equilibrium price, okay? We have the equilibrium price lower than the market price. In this particular case, our price is, say, let's say P3. So let's say P3. What will be the effect on the market? Here, you realize that P3 is higher, so less will be what? Will be demanded. Less will be what? Demanded. Let me use a different diagram. So in this particular case, if you have this, this is our demand, this is our supply. This is our supply. So we have this as equilibrium what? Price. P1, we have this as equilibrium what? Quantity. Let's say Q1. Okay. Now, if price is more than the equilibrium price, maybe let's say P3, what would be the demand? So we trace it to hit the quantity demanded, the demand curve, then we trace it down. So this is maybe let's say Q2. Q2 would be the quantity what demanded. And what would be the supply? So we trace it again to hit the supply curve. And when you trace it downwards, you will have the supply curve, let's say PQ3. So this will be the quantity supply. This will be the quantity supply. This will be the quantity supply. Now, in this particular case, you realize that our quantity supply, okay, is exceedingly higher than quantity what demanded, or our quantity demanded, okay, is less than the quantity what supplied, or our quantity demanded is less than the quantity what supplied. So in this particular case, they are supplying more than is being what demanded. So there will be too much of that particular good in the market. So in this particular case, there's going to be what is called the excess what? The excess supply. Remember the first one where price was lower than the equilibrium price, we had excess what? Demand. But in this particular case, price is higher than the equilibrium price, so we will have excess what? We will have excess what? Supply. And because we have excess supply, it also means there is going to be what? Surplus in the market. There's also going to be surplus in the market because the amount that is being supplied is more than the amount that is being what? Demanded. So if price, okay, if the market price is more than the equilibrium price, as we can see here, the price here is more than the equilibrium price, there would be what? Excess supply. In this particular case, the quantity supply, in this particular case, the quantity supplied would also exceed the quantity what demanded, as we can see. The quantity supplied will also exceed the quantity demanded. Or quantity demanded would be what? Would be less than the quantity supplied. I'm just giving you the other alternative. So quantity demanded will be less than what? Quantity supplied. So in this case, how do we quantify the excess what? Supply, or how do we quantify what? The surplus. So you realize that the surplus or the excess supply would also be the difference between how much is being what supplied and how much is being what is being demanded. So in this case, it's also going to be what? The quantity what supplied minus the quantity what demanded. So this will be the surplus or the excess what supply. So if government is putting up subsidies, okay, for people, maybe government is giving subsidies to farmers to produce more tomatoes. Now, if they produce more tomatoes, what will happen to, for instance, we have tomatoes, okay, for government to improve on farmers' welfare. Government provides subsidies, and the provision of subsidies increases the supply of tomatoes. Okay, if demand remains constant, then there's going to be a problem in the market because more of tomatoes should be supplied than what than is what demanded. Now, let's transfer this particular case the existence of surplus and then shortages into a key concept that we all know about. Let's look at issues on what we call the price controls, the price controls. And here we are talking about what? A situation where government sets prices, okay, where we have restrictions in how much a particular good can be traded, maybe how much a particular good can be sold, and how much a particular goods can be what can be bought. So if we have what is called the maximum price, and we also have what is called what the minimum price. And as you can see, we have the maximum and then we have what? We have the minimum what price. So under price control, we have the maximum amount that you can actually trade a commodity. And then we also have the minimum price that you can also what trade a particular what commodity. Now let's look at the situation where we have a normal demand and supply curve. So for instance, let's look at the goods market. Let's look at the goods market. Let's look at the goods market. If we have this as the quantity, we have this as what? As price. We have this as price. If we have let me come. If we have this as the demand, this as what? As the supply. This as the supply. So remember, we are looking at what? Price controls as the maximum and minimum price, okay, of a particular good, that a particular good can be traded. So here there are limits to which you can actually trade this particular what good, this particular good. Now, when you look at a situation where you have government intervention in the market, there is going to be a new dynamic that you will be introducing. Okay. Now, this will give us the equilibrium. Remember, we are looking at the goods market. So if you have this will be the equilibrium what price. Let's say PE. This will be the equilibrium what quantity. Let's say Q what QE. Let's say the equilibrium quantity QE. Now, remember, in the absence of any price controls, this is how much demanders pay for it, and this is also how much what suppliers also pay for it. Remember, I said it at equilibrium we have only one price. But government may see, maybe let's say in the market of farmers, this is tomatoes market. Government sees that this particular price that people are buying tomatoes, maybe per kilo or whatever, it's not good. So to improve farmers' welfare, government says a maximum what price. Government says a maximum what price. Okay, government says a maximum price. So in this particular case, government will tell you that, fine, I want to improve farmers' welfare. So no longer sell at what? At PE. Now your new price should be what? P1. Now the new price should be P1. The new price should be P what? Should be P1. In this particular case, what will happen? Yes, there's going to be some problem because at P1, which is higher than what equivalent price, what will happen? Demand will fall, as we can see. So demand will fall, quantity demanded. And what about supply? Farmers will be happy, and then they do what? They sell more. They produce more. They supply more. What? They supply more of tomatoes, as you can see. So remember, it becomes illegal. It becomes illegal for you to sell or for you to trade in this particular good, let's say tomatoes, at any price less than what? Less than P1. But you realize that at that particular higher price, less is being demanded. So in this particular case, you will see that there is going to be a problem in the market, or there's going to be disequilibrium in the market, because the price the government is actually fixing is not the price demanders actually like. So in this case, we will have quantity demanded okay, being less than quantity what supply. So if quantity demanded is less than quantity supply, you will have a situation where you have what excess what supply because they supply more than is being what demanded. So at P1, so you realize that at P1, quantity supply is more than quantity what demanded. So at P1, you will have what is called the what the existence of what. Mhm, of what of surplus because supply is more than what demand. So you will find farmers or whatever or sellers of what of tomatoes are having more of what of goods that are not being what bought. How much is the what excess what surplus? Okay, or excess supply at P1. So at P1, the surplus would be what? Mhm. QS minus what? Q what? G. So this is how much will be in the market. No one will be buying. And who caused it? The government. So what should the government do? The government can step in to do what? To buy the excess supply from the excess supply from the farmers. And how much is the government coming to buy? The government is coming to buy the amount of what? Surplus. So if government is buying the amount of surplus that is there, it means that the market will be what? Cleared. So it means that the market will be cleared. So government needs to clear the market. And by clearing the market, government needs to eliminate the disequilibrium in the system. And to eliminate the disequilibrium in the system, government needs to buy the available what? The available surplus as a result of the imposition of what? Of this particular price control. Okay. So in this case, for the market to be cleared, for for the market to be cleared, government needs to buy the what? The surplus. So you need to estimate the surplus. So if I give you a question and ask you to estimate how much the government should buy to clear the market, it means that the government should buy the excess what surplus. Okay, should buy the excess what surplus. Should buy the excess what surplus. Now, if we also transfer this to the case of what to the case of let's say maybe the labor market. If we also transfer this to the labor, remember government is setting what a minimum price. So this is the minimum amount that we should trade this particular commodity. So here we are talking about what the goods market in this case. So here I should have written it. So this is minimum price. This is minimum price. So this, in this case, we are talking about minimum, the effect of minimum price. Minimum. So this is minimum. This is minimum. So this is the minimum price that this particular commodity should be traded. It becomes illegal if you trade below this particular minimum price. So this particular minimum price, we also call it the price what? The price floors. The price what? Floors. So when you hear price floors, it's the same thing as what? Minimum price. It's the same thing as minimum price. So in the presence of what? Price floors or minimum price, there will be what? Surplus or excess what? Supply. Now, let's remember we are talking about the goods market. Let's transfer this to the labor market. Let's transfer this to the labor market and you will see what will also happen. Let's transfer this to the labor market. So this is the labor market. And by labor market, we are looking at the market where we have demand and supply of what? Of labor. So from the labor market perspective, yes, government says from the labor market perspective, we will have this as what? Quantity supply of labor, just to differentiate it from the goods market. And here, remember here in this particular case, the price of labor is what? Is the wage. So in this case, we will have what? Wages. So let me, because it's featuring for the first time, I will just write it like W wages. So we will know. So W is the wages. So this is the price of what? Of labor. And this is the quantity of what? Of labor. Now, we have this as the demand for labor. Okay. And we have what? This as the supply of what? As the supply of labor. We have this as the supply of labor. We have this as the supply of labor. Now, this is the equilibrium what? Situation or equilibrium condition. In this case, we will have what? WE as the what? As the equilibrium wage. We have QE as the equilibrium quantity, which means that here, remember, the demand for labor will represent what? Employers, because employers demand for our what? Our labor. So we have employers here. And the supply of labor, we are looking at what? You and I. So here we are looking at what? Workers. We are looking at what? Workers. So this is the equilibrium quantity for labor. So employers are willing to do what? To employ QE and supply at which particular price, at which WE. Suppliers of labor, who are the workers, are also willing to accept what? To accept what? WE, that equilibrium what? Wage. But government sees that no, the amount this particular price, the suppliers or employers are paying for this wage is too small. It's too what? It's too small. Are we getting it? It's too small. So what will the government do? Government will set a wage that no, I want to improve on the welfare of workers. So I will set a wage that this particular existing wage rate, which is what? WE, that this particular wage rate cannot beat. In other words, government is going to set a wage rate that is above what? Above what is the prevailing above the prevailing wage rate in the market. So government is saying that no, the amount that is being paid for this particular labor, okay, which is the wage, is lower. So to improve on workers' welfare, government is setting a what? A minimum what? A wage. And by minimum wage, government is saying that this is the minimum amount that this particular laborers or workers, okay, should be paid. By setting the minimum wage or to improve on workers' welfare, it means that this particular new wage will be higher than what is being paid in the market. So government will set a new price, which is what? Let's say W1. W1 becomes the new wage rate. And that new wage rate, W1, is called the minimum what? It's called the minimum wage. It's called the minimum wage. So at that minimum wage, what will be the effect on the supply side and what will be the effect on the demand side? You realize that at that minimum wage, we have this as the what? As the new demand for labor. So when you go down, you will have what? Q1. What has happened? The demand for labor has what? Has fallen because the wage rate has what? Increased. Not all employers are willing to pay the new minimum what? Wage. Or not all workers or not all employers can afford the new minimum what? Wage. Now, what about the supply side? You trace it to hit the supply and then you trace it downwards. This will give us the new what? Supply. What has happened? Supply has increased from QE to Q what? 2, because the minimum wage has what? The amount of wage has what? Has increased. Now, in this particular case, there is going to be what is called the excess what? Supply of what? Of labor, because more is being what? Supplied, as you can see. This is our quantity what? Supplied, and this is our quantity what? Demanded. So you will see that at W1, which is the minimum wage, amount that is supplied is more than amount that is what being demanded. So there's going to be what? Excess supply. And that excess supply, will be what? Like we say, it is what? Surplus supply of labor. In this particular case, there is going to be what? Unemployment. Because we are looking at the labor market. In this case, the surplus or the excess supply or unemployment, or the amount of unemployment would be what? The amount that is being what? Supplied. That's the new supply at the new minimum, at the new rate, minus how much is being what? Demanded. Minus how much is being what? Demanded. So this is the amount of what? Unemployment in the system. So this will be the amount of employment in the system that will be caused by what? By the minimum what? By the minimum wage. Now, remember this particular thing that we are looking at. We are looking at what? The minimum what? We are looking at the minimum wage. We are looking at the minimum wage in this case. Remember the first one, we're looking at the minimum price. So here we are looking at what? The labor market. So we were talking about what? The minimum wage. So W, this W1 becomes the minimum wage, becomes the minimum wage, becomes the minimum what? Wage. Or we said it is also what? Where is it here? Price what? Price floor. Price what? Floor. So let's look at this key dynamics. This is the level of what? Unemployment in the system caused by the minimum what? Caused by minimum wage. Who caused it? The government, because government increased the minimum wage. Now, when you look at this particular situation, there are several dynamics that you can see. This particular unemployment that we see, this particular unemployment that we see, okay, the unemployment that we see can be divided into several. So we have those that are new entrants in the job market, and those that are already new, old job seekers. So we have new entrants or new job seekers. This is job. So we have new entrants or new job seekers, or new job seekers, or new job seekers in the market. Now let's look at this situation. This is the amount of unemployment, and the amount of unemployment is what? This quantity demanded, this quantity supply. So the difference will give you the amount of what? Unemployment in the system, the amount of unemployment in the system. Now, when you look at it this way, remember, we have the price of what? The good. In the labor market, it is the wage rate. And we have the supply curve here, as we can see, the red line. People supply their what? Their services, okay, to employers. When the price was what? Or when the wage rate was at equilibrium, this was at WE, this was the equilibrium what? Condition. You realize that at this particular equilibrium condition, we had people who didn't want to do what? To supply their labor. Who didn't want to supply their what? Their labor. Which means that they didn't feel this particular wage rate was good for them to supply their labor, even though other job seekers were accepting that particular wage rate. So you will see that once there is an increase in the wage rate from WE to W what? 1, there will be new people, because the increment in the wage rate will entice people to do what? To offer their service or to look for job, because salaries or wages are now what? Are now higher. So what will be the amount of, how do you quantify the new job seekers in the market because of what? Of the increment in the wage rate. You realize that at equilibrium, this was the supply of what? Of wage rate. This was the supply of what? Labor. Remember, this was also the demand for labor, because I said at equilibrium, quantity demanded is equal to what? Quantity what? Supply. So at that equilibrium, this was the supply of labor. And you realize that when the price increased, and remember, if this was the supply of labor, this was the what? The wage rate. And when when government increased the wage rate, when government increased the wage rate from from W what? E to W1, what will happen to quantity supply? Remember, supply will move to a new curve, because the each price, okay, the corresponding price has increased. So supply will increase, from quantity supply will increase from this particular side of the curve to this particular side. So maybe let's say A. Let's say A. So it will move. The curve will move from E, as you can see, to what? To A, where this particular portion of the movement denotes those who are now offering their services in the market, because the wage rate has increased. So and at that particular new point, we have the quantity supplied as Q2. So the amount of new entrants, remember, there are new entrants in the market, and they haven't actually done what? They haven't actually provided gotten employment. So the new job seekers would be what? How do you quantify the new job seekers? So based on this curve, the new job seekers will be what? The new quantity supplied at the new wage rate, which is what? Q2, as you can see, which is Q2 minus what? The equilibrium quantity supplied, which is this one. So remember, price has increased. That is, the wage rate has increased. And at the same time, people are now beginning to supply more. Maybe you had your brother who was in the house. He didn't want to work, saying, no, the price that they are paying is too small. The salaries are too small. And because the government has increased the minimum wage, you will now find them looking for what? For jobs. So they will now enter the job market to look for jobs. So the amount of people who are now looking for jobs would be the amount of available labor supply, okay, minus how much was being supplied at equilibrium, which is what? QE, which is QE. So this is the number of new entrants in the job market. This is the number of new entrants in the job market. This is the number of new entrants in the job market. So what about those who will be sacked? Remember, there will be those who will be sacked. I think there are those that I said, the old job seekers. So this is those who will be sacked. So what about those who will be sacked? What about those who will be sacked? Let's go back to the curve. Let's go back to the curve. If you go back to the curve, you will see that in this new supply, in this new wage rate, remember, those will be sacked. We'll be looking at it from the perspective of what? The employers taking the action. Now, in the new wage rate, not all employers will be willing to pay. So they will lay off some workers, okay? They will lay off some workers. So not all, employers would be willing to pay the new wage rate. So they will downsize. So by downsizing, it means that they will decrease their demand for what? For labor. They will decrease their demand for labor. Remember, because price has increased from WE to W1, demand for labor, from the law of demand side, at higher price, less will be what demanded. So you will see that from the perspective of the what? Of this employers, demand, which was QE at equilibrium, and the price was WE, because we now have an increase in the minimum wage or the minimum price, what will happen to demand? Demand will what? The quantity demanded will fall to, let's say, H, where H is this one. So at that particular age, the new demand will be what? Q1. So this will be the new demand for what? For workers at which wage rate? W what? I, or W what? 1. So how many people will be sacked? You remember, before the minimum imposition of the minimum wage, they were employing QE. And after the imposition of the minimum wage, how many people have been employed? Q what? 1. And you realize that the number of people who are employed at Q1 is now exceedingly lesser or lower than how much was employed at what? At what? QE. So the amount of people who will be sacked, will be what? The QE, which was how many people who were being what? Employed at equilibrium, minus Q what? Q1. That is where Q1 is the what? Is how many people who have been what? Employed, which is this one. So even by disaggregating this total unemployment, where we said the total amount of unemployment is what? Q2 minus what? Q1. You can actually disaggregate this into or you can quantify this into, or separate this, or divide this, or categorize this into the number of workers who will lose their jobs as a result of the imposition of the minimum wage, and the number of people who will be entering the job market, or the number of new people who will be entering the job market to look for employment because the wage rate has increased. So if we pick this unemployment, remember we said that this as the unemployment, and this as unemployment is the same thing as what? Is the same thing as Q2. Remember, this is the same thing as Q2 minus what? Minus what? Q1. It's the same thing as Q2 minus Q1. So if we pick unemployment, if you pick the unemployment as Q2 minus what? Q1, it means that this amount of unemployment, okay, which I will call U, can also be separated into those that are being what? Sacked. Remember, the amount of unemployment is what? Q2 minus Q1. So the amount of unemployment, which is Q2 minus Q1, can be separated into those that are what? Being sacked, which is what? This side, and those that are new in the job market, who will now be looking for job, is from this side. So here is those that are sacked. This side denotes those that are sacked. So this side denotes that those that are sacked, and this side denotes the new job seekers, the new job seekers, the new job seekers. So if you want to quantify this, the unemployment will now be what? Those that are sacked. The unemployment will be those that are sacked, which is what? QE minus what? Q1 plus the new what? Job seekers, plus the new job seekers. And what is the new job seekers? Those that will now enter the market to look for job. The new job seekers will be Q2 minus what? QE minus QE. So this represents those who are sacked, and this will represent those who are looking for employment. That's the job seekers. They are in the market looking for employment, but they are yet to find what? Jobs. So as you can see, so this is the same thing as what? As this. So if you are asked to quantify the amount of unemployment, it's just this one, the first one. It's just this one. And I can also ask you to estimate the amount of people who will be sacked. So it's basically just looking at the first side. And the amount of people, the new entrants, because if you were idly in the house because of the increment in the wage rates, you've decided to do what? To now enter the job market. This will be the number of those who would be what? Are looking for employment. So remember, the introduction of the minimum wage causes unemployment in the system, or increases in the minimum wage will cause what? Unemployment in the system. So in this particular case, what practical solution should the government do? Once minimum wage is increased, remember, there will be unemployment in the system. So government needs to clear the market. Remember, by clearing the market, it means that there shouldn't be excess supply or what? Excess what? Demand. So for government to clear the market, this particular people who are now unemployed, okay, these particular people who are now unemployed should be what? Employed by the government. So maybe government will need to set up what? To establish new employment initiatives to be able to employ, the existence, to be able to employ the unemployed, people in the job market. Maybe that's why government sets up the NAPCO. We have the youth employment programs and the rest. So these are some of the initiatives government is doing to actually reduce the number of what? Unemployment in the system. So you realize that as labor union is continuously asking for increments in minimum wage, which is good to improve their overall welfare, it also indirectly increases what? Unemployment. So you will find the government actually, nagging in the amount of minimum wage that the government will be increasing. So it's not always the case that government does not want to pay. Government also considers the fact that excessive increment in the minimum wage will cause unemployment in the system. And once there is going to be unemployment in the system, we all know the consequences in terms of, social vices. In fact, overall demand, domestic demand will be low because people will not have much income to purchase. Okay. And we know the vices that also come with what unemployment in an economy. So once labor union is calling for we are going on demonstration or we are protesting, we are going to strike because government is not being committed to increasing the minimum wage. Sometimes it's not because government does not want to pay, okay, but government is also looking at what the employment the reduction in the unemployment, the reduction in employment or the increase in unemployment that the increased or the new minimum wage is going to cause in the market. So because of that, government does not really significantly increase minimum wage, not because it will increase the government wage bill, okay, it will also cause unemployment in the system where people will be sacked because no employer would have to pay below the what no employer would have to pay below the minimum wage because it becomes what illegal. And because you cannot pay that the minimum below lower than the minimum wage, we tend to do away with a number of what workers so that you are able to cope with the new higher wage rate. So this is these are some of the dynamics. Okay, now let's look at the other side of it. Remember, we've been looking at this minimum wage. Let's transfer this to maybe say the housing market. Let's transfer this to the housing market. So in the housing market or maybe real estate market, in the housing market or real estate market, in the housing market or real estate market, let's look at, remember, this is the minimum wage side. So let's look at the maximum wage side. Let's look at the maximum wage side. So we have this quantity supply, maybe of a housing, supply of housing, and this is the price or maybe rent. This is rent. Let's say rent. Okay. Now we have this as demand. We have this as supply. So this is demand for rental apartment, and this is supply of what rental apartment. Okay. So by demand for rental apartment, we are looking at what tenants. We are looking at the tenants, and the supply. We are looking at what maybe say landlords. We are looking at landlords. Okay. Now this is the equilibrium what? Rent. And this is the equivalent quantity supply of what? Rent. Okay. Now let's say without the market intervention, this is the supply of housing units and this is the demand. So tenants are okay paying this. Landlords, as there is no existence of what excess supply or excess what demand. But government sees that no, landlords or house owners or homeowners are ripping off tenants. Okay, so because of that, government is going to set a maximum rent. So here we are looking at what rental control. So government is going to or rent control. So government is going to control the rent what market or the real estate market. In this particular case, government is saying that the amount of rent that we pay, okay, is too much. And for that matter, I'm going to control the rent. No landlord should charge RE, which is what the prevailing market price. Remember, it is a
No,
market price because it's the
Ofida,
price, it's the
come.
price,
Go into
it's the price,
open the fridge. There's drink. You pick and you send it out and pour and drink. Don't
is the
see me.
price, is the price that
Get
is
ready
being
the
paid,
food.
is the price that is being paid by what demanders, which is tenants, and they are happy, and it's also the price given by what by the landlords. But government is saying that yes, even though they pay for this, for the rent at this rate is too much, and for that matter, I'm setting a maximum price above which it becomes illegal for any landlord to charge, and it also becomes illegal for any tenant to pay. So in this particular case, government is saying that no longer charge RE, henceforth the new which rent should be what, R1. So this particular R1 that you are looking at becomes the what, the maximum what price. So this is the maximum price that tenants and landlords should what, should pay. Tenants should pay for what, for this rent, and the landlord should also charge. But remember, the R1 as a new rate or rent is lower than the what, the equilibrium what, the equilibrium rent. So what will happen? What will happen? You will see that supply would fall. You should test it to hit the supply curve. Supply will fall from QE to Q what, 1. What about demand? Demand will, you see that demand will what, will increase. Demand will increase. From QE to Q what, 2. So what is happening? There is this equilibrium in the market because quantity demanded, which is what, Q2, and quantity supplied are not the same. In this particular case, at R1, you will realize that the quantity I had demanded, which is the same thing as what, Q2, will be more than the quantity supplied, which is the same thing as what, as Q1. So what are we seeing? You realize that at this particular R1, which is the new wage rate, there will be excess demand. And that excess demand means there would be what? Shortage of housing units because more would be needed. So people will now be looking for apartments to rent. So if you were patching with your friend or your brother or your uncle, you would now want to go and rent on your own because rent is now made legally cheaper than before. In this particular case, because there's going to be excess demand, there will be shortage of what? Rental units in the market. And that particular shortage of rental units, to quantify it, will be what? Mm-hmm. Q is here, Q2 minus Q1. In other words, would be the demand minus what? The quantity demanded minus what? The quantity supplied. So this is the shortage that we will find. And this particular shortage will also be as a result of what? Those tenants who would be sacked, they will tell them, oh, I have a person who is coming from what is the name? I have a person who is coming from Germany for 6 months. So I would need next month. I would need this particular room. I'm no more renting. The landlord is sacking you. No person is coming. So the landlord will sack you. So how many people will lose their accommodation because of because of the maximum what price, which is because of the new price control. Remember, this particular case we are still looking at what, maximum price, maximum price, and here is the same thing as price what. Remember, the first one was price ceiling. Here a price floor. Here will be what, price ceiling. This is called price ceiling. So government will set a ceiling, and that ceiling is this particular R1. Okay. So here, how many people will lose their accommodation because price is now what, lower, rent is now lower. They will reduce the supply of what, of their accommodation. In this case, it's going to be this side, as you can see. So this is the side of those who will be sacked. So this side, they will lose their what, their accommodation because suppliers or landlords, as you can see, landlords or suppliers will now reduce how much is being available. Will now reduce how much is being what, available. So those who will sack. So this is the shortage amount of rooms that people are looking for to buy, and you can disaggregate this between those who will be sacked, and between those who will be sacked means between those who will lose their accommodation. And here those who will lose their accommodation will be what? The equilibrium minus what? The new supply. So the equilibrium is what? QE minus the new supply, which is what? Q1. As you can see, the supply will fall. So this represents those who would be sacked. So this side represents those who would be sacked. And what about those who were patient with their relatives or friends? And because rent is now cheaper, they would want to now rent on their own. They would now want to live separately. And these guys would be what? Would be this side. You remember, because they are now because wage rate is now lower, as you can see. Remember, they will be prospective tenants, so they will be operating on the demand side. So because previously it was here, and then the new wage rent has made the price to be lower, so they will now move from here to here. So they will no longer be operating here; they will now be looking at it here. So the new people or the new people looking for what? For rent, that's a new tenant, will be what? QE, as you can see, minus what? Q2, as we can see, minus what? QE. So those who are new accommodation seekers, or the purchase, those who were previously purchased with their relatives or friends, okay? So the new accommodation seekers would be what? Uh-huh. Q2, as you can see, minus QE. Q2, Q2, as we can see, minus what? Minus QE. So you see that the amount of shortage in the system, which is QD, the amount of shortage, so overall shortage in the system, remember we quantify it as what? As Q2 minus Q1, if you can see from here to here. Q2 minus what? Q1, which is here. Q2 here minus Q1 can be divided into two. This particular portion, those who would be sacked by their landlords, and this particular portion, those who would now be joining the new market to look for accommodation because they are tired living with their friends or relatives. So it will be this side, those who will be sacked, and this side, those who will be looking for new accommodation, which is what? QE. So this one, you realize that Q2 minus Q1 is the same thing as what? Q2. The same thing as what? Q2 minus what? QE, where Q2 minus QE represents the new seekers, the new job seekers, which is the B part here, minus what? This part, which is the what? QE minus Q1, minus QE, QE minus what? Q1, where QE minus Q1 represents those who will be sacked. That's those who will lose their what? Their accommodation. And this one is those who will be looking for new, maybe new apartment seekers or new accommodation seekers. Because rent is now cheaper, so they now feel their purchasing power has increased, so they can get accommodation. So this would be the shortage. This will be the shortage. This will be the shortage. So if government wants to clear the market, remember government caused this shortage in the housing market because government has imposed, price control. Government has imposed what is the name, maximum rent, okay, below which it becomes, above which it becomes illegal to rent. So because government has caused this, government would need to clear the market by providing accommodation for the shortage. One, by providing accommodation for the new accommodation seekers, and also providing accommodation for those who would be what? Those who would be stuck. So government would need to complete, is it the Sagleme housing unit that is now an albatross around our neck? Government need to provide affordable accommodation to be able to accommodate this in order to clear the rental market. So government needs to provide affordable accommodation so people can actually rent, to have decent, living. So this is how we explore this further dynamics. If I give you a question, then you just need to solve, using our figures, and you will get the same answer. I think there is a past question on some of these things. Maybe I will share that with you after the class. Any question before we proceed? Any question before we proceed? Okay. So now let's look at the yes.
Any question? No question.
Okay.
Continue.
Okay, no question. Okay. So now let's look at the last side of it, which is very important. So we are going to look at elasticity. So remember from the law of demand. We were saying that at a higher price, what should happen? Less is being what? Demanded. And at lower price, more is being what? Demanded. And from the law of supply too, suppliers be happy to supply, and at lower price, suppliers would not be happy. So less will be what? Supplied. Here we know when the price is low, people tend to demand more. And when the price is less, when the price is high, and when the price is high, people tend to demand less. And when suppliers also supply less. We are low much. Demand will fall. Now the big question is by how much? If price is high, demand will fall much. Price by how much? If high, supply would increase by how much? That's the question. If price is low, how supply would fall by how much? Now we can quantify the changes into the quantity as a result of changes in price using the concept of what? Elasticity. So by elasticity, we are basically looking at what? We are basically looking at what? The responsiveness.
Oh, today your
The
network is
response, yes.
poor. So maybe if you can
Your
slow down.
network is poor.
Yeah, it's from your side. So if you can slow down. Yeah.
Okay, no problem. Okay, elasticity, we are looking at the responsiveness to changes in what? In price. In this case, we are looking at what is called the price what? Elasticity of demand. So we have price elasticity of demand and we have price elasticity of supply. So by looking at, let me just cancel this to make it more general. By elasticity, we are looking at what? The price elasticity of demand. And by price elasticity, we are looking at what? So what is price elasticity of demand? We are looking at the responsiveness of what? Now of quantity demanded to change in what? price. Now, that particular is measured by what is called what elasticity. So elasticity measures the responsiveness of quantity of changes in of quantity demanded to changes in what price. So we can represent, or we can write elasticity, price elasticity as what? So if this is elasticity, we can write price elasticity as this. So when I write this, it means this is price elasticity of demand. This is price elasticity of demand. This is price elasticity of demand. So how do we estimate this? Demand curve. We have this as quantity demanded. We have this as what supply. We have this as quantity. We have this as price. Now, if price falls, what will happen to demand? Demand will what? Demand will increase. Demand will increase from Q1 to Q2. So now we are no longer operating at point A. We are operating at what? Point B. So in this particular case, the focus will be on this
A
new
concern,
point.
please.
Doc, a
Yes,
question.
please go ahead.
Doc, please start over the elasticity again. The network is not very good for us here.
Okay. Okay. So here by elasticity, we are looking at what? The responsiveness of what? Quantity to changes in price. Remember, from both the law of demand and law of supply, we said once there is a change in price, quantity will change. So from the law of demand, at a higher price, less is supplied. At higher price, less is demanded, as you can see, because of the negative relationship. And when price at lower price, more is being what demanded. Now, if price is increasing and you are decreasing demand, now the big question is by how much will you decrease quantity demanded? If price is falling from the law of demand, you are expected to increase demand. Now the big question is by how much will you increase demand? We increase demand as a result of changes in price using the concept of what elasticity. Even from a law of supply, we're saying that at higher price, more is supplied, and at lower price, less is supplied. When the price is high, suppliers supply more. By how much will they supply? And when the price is low, suppliers supply what? Less. Now the question is by how much will they reduce supply? We can estimate the reduction or the changes in quantity supplied and quantity demanded as a result of changes in price by the concept of what? Elasticity. So from these two concepts, law of the demand, law of supply, we have elasticity as what? Price elasticity of demand to take care of what? The demand side. And we also have price elasticity of supply to take care of what? The supply side. And we are saying that measuring the changes in quantity demanded, okay, as a result of changes in price can only be done using the concept of what? Elasticity, which means that elasticity simply means the responsiveness of what? Quantity to changes in demand. So if you are looking at elasticity of demand, then it will be responsiveness of quantity demanded to changes in what? Demand, to changes in price. So by elasticity, we have two. One is what? The price elasticity of demand. And by price elasticity of demand, it is defined as the responsiveness of quantity demanded for changes in what? Price. How much will quantity demanded, or how much will quantity change if there is a change in what? In price? We know from the law of demand or from the law of supply, there should be some changes in the quantity supplied or quantity demanded. But elasticity will move a little further, okay, to now precisely estimate how much supply will change or how much demand will change as a result of the changes in what? In the price. So we're looking at the first one, which is the price elasticity of demand. And I said that we are looking at how responsive quantity demanded is to changes in price. And basically, we measure this responsiveness using what? Elasticity. And elasticity is written as this one. Going forward, if I write this, this is epsilon, and this is P. So this is price elasticity. And I'm saying that if you pick a simple demand curve, this is what? Price, when price was P1, Okay, this was the quantity demanded. Now price fell to P2. We expect quantity demanded to increase, as you can see. So we are no more operating in this old point, which was price being P1, quantity being P2. We are now operating on the new point, which is what? B, price being P2, quantity being what? Q2. So by the elasticity, okay, by elasticity, price elasticity, we are looking at what? The percentage change in what? The percentage change in what? Quantity demanded all over percentage change in what? In price. We are looking at the percentage change in quantity demanded all over the percentage change in what? In price. This can also be written as the percentage change in, there's the first one, which is the percentage change in quantity demanded. Can be written as what? The new quantity, as you can see from the top, this is the new quantity. So this is the new point, this is the old point. So we have the new price and new quantity. Old price and old what? Quantity. So in this particular case, we are going to have the percentage change in what quantity demanded is the new quantity minus the old quantity divided by the old quantity. We are looking at it in percentage terms, so times what? 100. So this is the denominator. So this is the denominator we've just estimated. So the numerator would be, this is the numerator. So the denominator, which is the lower one, would be percentage change in what? In price or in P for consistency. Let me just do it this way. Would be what? The new price, remember, minus what? Old price divided by the old price times what? Times 100. So which means that our overall elasticity would be this whole thing that we are looking at divided by this whole thing that we are looking at. So which means that from this particular session, which is the first one, it will be what? New quantity will be what? As you can see, Q2 minus what? Q1. So here will be Q2 minus Q1 all over Q1 times what? 100. And this particular side, which is from the price side, would be what? P, what is the new price? P2 minus P1 all over P1 times what? Times 100. So whatever you will get here would be the elasticity. So here you will have the elasticity to be what? Q. Let me just, so the elasticity, price elasticity of demand would now be what? Q2 minus Q1 all over, let me do it this way. All over Q what? Q1 times 100 divided by P2 minus what? P1 all over P1 times what? Times 100. This will give you the elasticity. This will give you the elasticity. And you have the values here. So assuming we have this demand. So price was 1. No, price was 2. Quantity demanded was, let's say, 8. Then price increased to 4. Quantity demanded decreased to maybe 6. So what will be the elasticity? Remember, I'm saying price increased to what? To 4. Then quantity also fell. So here would be the 1 point. Here would also be another point. with the increase in price from 2 to 4, what will happen to quantity? Quantity will what? Will fall from 8 to what? To 6, as you can see. So we are no longer operating at point A, which is our old point. We are now operating at what? Point B, which is the new point. So at point B, we have price, new price of P4, old price P2, new quantity Q6, 6, old quantity 8. So to estimate the price elasticity of demand is going to be the percentage change in what? In quantity all over the percentage change in what? In price. So here, remember the percentage change in what? The first one, which is the percentage change in quantity, will be what? New quantity minus old quantity, okay? All over old quantity times what? Times 100. So here, new quantity is what? This is the new point. So the quantity will be 6. So 6 minus old quantity, 8, all over old quantity, which is 8 times what? Times 100. So here will be minus 2 over 8 times what? Times 100. What will you get? Minus 1 over 4 times 100. You will get minus what? 25%. So this is the percentage change in what? Quantity demanded. Now let's look at the percentage change in what? In price. So here will be what? New price minus old price all over what? Old price times 100. So here will be what? We look at it from the what? From the price side. So new price is what? Is 4. So new price is 4. Old price is 2. All over 2 times what? Times 100. So here will be what? This minus this. You will get what? 2. All over what? 2 times what? 100, which will be what? 100%. So our elasticity, price elasticity of demand, will now be what? Remember we said this percentage change in what? In quantity demanded, all over percentage change in what? In price. So here would be what? Minus 25% all over 100%. So here is 25 divided by what? By 100, which is basically 1 over what? 4. So what will you get? What will you get? 0 point what? What will you get? You will get 0 point, that's 25%. So what will you get? 0 point minus 0 0.25 minus 0 point minus 0 0.25. So our elasticity will be minus 0 0.25. So this is the elasticity. You will realize that elasticity, price elasticity of demand. Let me just do it this way. Price elasticity of demand. This one, price elasticity of demand is always negative, which means that the price elasticity of demand, okay, is always less than what? 0. Why? Why is it always less than 0? Or why is it always negative? Because of the law of demand. Because of the law of demand. And what is the law of demand saying? It is talking about the negative relationship between price and what? And quantity demanded. Between price and quantity demanded. Between price and quantity demanded. Okay. Now we have several types of elasticity. So let's look at them. Types of elasticity. Let's look at one. So the first one we determine the price of elasticity. Please note, we determine the price of elasticity. We determine the price of elasticity. We determine the price elasticity, okay, or we determine the type of price elasticity. So so you can write, we determine the type. We determine the type of price elasticity using the value. So let's say using the absolute value, using the absolute value of the price elasticity. So we determine the type of elasticity using the value, the absolute value of the price elasticity, which means that the value that you will get here will tell you the type of elasticity we are looking at. So here we expect to have one, elastic demand. Elastic. Now, demand price elasticity is said to be elastic if the price elasticity that you are finding, okay, is greater than 1. So if the price elasticity that you find, the absolute value, remember if we say something is absolute when you remove the negative sign. So remember we found the elasticity to be what? 0 minus 0.25 here. So its absolute value would be what? It means this way. So the absolute value of that elasticity will be to just take off the negative sign and look at the positive. So which is this one. So we are looking at the what? The absolute value. So just removing the negative sign. So if price elasticity is what? It's greater than 1. It means that the demand for that particular good is what? Elastic. And what does that mean? It means it's elastic. And what does that mean? Let's look at this. This is quantity. This is price. If your demand curve is like this, D, because the price elasticity of demand is greater than 1, it means that the relationship between price and quantity in terms of how responsive quantity is to changes in price would not be the same. One will be greater than what? Than the other. Now, let's look at something. If price is P1, if price is P1, if price is P1, what is the quantity demanded? This is the quantity demanded, Q1. Let's say price has been increased to P2. Price has been increased to P2. So price is now P2. What will be the new quantity demanded? Of course, its quantity demanded will fall. So now by how much? The demanded will now be. This is Q2. So you will see that the changes in price, okay, are less than the changes in what? In quantity. So elastic, it means that the change, please note, if price is elastic, it means that the percentage change in quantity, okay, would be greater than the percentage change in what? In price. And because price elasticity is estimated as the percentage change in quantity all over percentage change in price, for this to be greater than 1, it means that the numerator, which is the one above the division, should be greater than the one below. So in this particular case, for price to be elastic, the percentage change in quantity demanded would be more than the percentage change in what? In price, which means that if you increase price by 1%, quantity demanded will fall by more than 1%. So basically, it means that changes in quantity demanded will be more than changes in what? In price. Which means that if demand for a particular commodity is elastic, it means that the elasticity will be greater than 1. And once it is greater than 1, it means that the changes in quantity demanded will be more than the changes in what? In price. So if you increase price by 2%, quantity demanded will fall by more than 2%. If you increase price by 100%, quantity demanded will fall by more than 1%. On the other hand, okay, on the other hand, if you decrease price by 1%, quantity demanded will increase by more than 1%. Or if you decrease price by 100%, quantity demanded will increase by more than 1%. Okay, so that is the elastic demand. So which means that if you have a particular good whose elasticity is greater than 1, and you increase your price, be rest assured that quantity demanded will fall by more than the percentage increase in the price. Now let's look at the second one. The second one, we are looking at what? Inelastic. So for inelastic, we are looking at a situation where the elasticity is what? Is less than 1. In this particular case, it also means that I've seen people saying I should slow down. Your seniors didn't tell you. Who would tell this new MBA student?
They should go and ask.
They've not told them.
No, I've not told them. They are
Okay.
but this
Okay,
one is
tell
like
them.
slow. This one is even slow.
Yes, you've not told them. That is my weakness. I'm very fast. So I've been trying to. I'm very fast. That's my key weakness that I acknowledge. Okay, so if you have inelastic demand, it means that one side of the equation, which is either the percentage change in quantity, will be less than the percentage change in price, or one side will be more than the other. So if it is less than 1, it means that the percentage change in what? Quantity demanded, which is the numerator, would be what? Less than the percentage change in what? In the price, which is the denominator. Remember, by elasticity, we are looking at the percentage change in quantity demanded all over percentage change in what? In price. So for this to be less than what? 1, it means that here, this top side should be lower than this side. So in this case, if elasticity is less than 1, it means that the percentage change in quantity demanded, as you can see, would be less than the percentage change in what? In price. Diagrammatically, we are going to have something like this. Quantity, price, okay? And in this case, we are going to have a demand curve like this. Remember, it is still downward sloping from left to what? To right, from left to right. Now, if we have this as price, P1, what is the quantity demanded? We trace it to hit the supply curve. Let me just put this one.
18 minutes more.
I have how many minutes more?
18 minutes.
I have how many?
18 minutes.
18 minutes.
Yeah, 1/8.
Okay, no problem. Okay, thank you. I forgot to charge this one. Okay, let's proceed. Okay, so if the price is P1, quantity demanded will be what? Q1. Okay, now let's say quantity demanded has increased. Price has been increased to P what? 2. What will happen to quantity demanded? Quantity demanded will fall to what? Q2. So you realize that the increase in price is more than what? The decrease in what? Quantity demanded. So in this case, demand is said to be what? Inelastic. So price elasticity of demand or elasticity would be less than 1, because how much you will decrease quantity, okay, is less than how much price has increased. So if they increase price by 50%, yes, you will reduce quantity, but the percentage reduction in quantity demanded will be less than how much is being what? How mine will be less than or will be lower than the percentage increase in what? In the price. Now, if we go to the third one, we have a situation where we say unitary elastic or unitary. In this case, we are talking about the price elasticity if price elasticity is equal to 1. So if price elasticity is equal to 1, it means that the elasticity that we are looking at, which is what the percentage change in quantity all over the percentage change in what? In price. For this to be equal to 1, it means that this particular side, which is the percentage change in quantity demanded, okay, should be equal to the percentage change in what? In price. So if percentage change in quantity demanded is equal to the percentage change in price, it means that demand is said to be unitary elastic. Demand is said to be unitary elastic. Here, diagrammatically, it means that if you have this as quantity, this as price, okay? If you have something like this, demand curve like this, if price is here, this is quantity demanded. Let's say price has been increased to P2. What will be the quantity? Would match with the change in what? Quantity for elasticity to be equal to 1. So what does that mean? It means that if you increase price by 50%, quantity demanded will also fall by how much? By 50%. If you decrease price by 50%, quantity demanded will also increase by 50%. It means that the percentage change in quantity demanded, okay, is equal to the percentage change in what? In price. So if you estimate the price relationship with quantity in a form of elasticity and you get 1, it means elasticity tends to be what? To be unitary elastic. So whatever price that you increase the quantity, whatever price that you increase the commodity by in terms of percentage change, quantity will also change by the same what? Margin, by the same margin. Now let's look at the other ones. Now we also have some abnormal ones, okay? We also have some abnormal ones. We will have one that is called perfectly inelastic. Now for perfectly inelastic, we are talking about something. Now, what will be the what is the name? The elasticity. So if you estimate the elasticity and the price elasticity is 0, diagrammatically, we are talking about this. Let's say this is quantity, this is price. Now, we normally use just a simple technique to know whether this is perfectly inelastic or not. Now, if your demand curve, okay, behaves like this, a straight line like this, is vertical like this. This is the special case of a demand curve. It means that the elasticity of demand will be what? Will be 0. Remember, our price elasticity is percentage change in quantity demanded all over percentage change in what? In price. In this particular case, this is the price at P1. What is the quantity demanded? Is Q1. Now they have increased price to P2. How much will you demand? It's the same quantity that you will demand. So here, percentage change in quantity demanded will be what? Will be 0 because there wouldn't be any change in quantity demanded, irrespective of the change in what? In price, irrespective of the change in price. So what can you see here? The top one, which is the numerator, would be 0 divided by any figure here. So the entire elasticity would be what? Would be 0. In this particular case, we say demand is said to be what? Perfectly inelastic. Demand is said to be perfectly inelastic. So here, irrespective of the price, consumers will still need that particular quantity. A special case of this is like patients with diabetes. They would need insulin. Okay. So irrespective of the price, they would need to survive. So they still buy the same shots of insulin. So if the pharmaceutical industry wants to rip off people, they just increase the price of insulin or whatever, so that those with diabetes would have no choice but to buy. In that case, for those with the diabetic patients, their demand for insulin tends to be perfectly what inelastic, because they cannot live without it. Okay, so it tends to be a necessity for them. So because they can no longer live without it, their price elasticity is virtually what? It's virtually zero. Now let's look at the other special case. We also have a situation where we have perfectly what? Elastic. Where we have perfectly elastic. In this particular case, we have the price elasticity here when it is near what? Infinity. When it is near infinity. When it is near infinity. So if price elasticity is near infinity, what will you be getting? So here we have what? For the new one, which is the perfectly elastic, we are talking about a situation where demand is like this. So this is the demand curve. So here, this is the price. What is the quantity? Quantity is what? Q1. Another quantity is the same, Q2. Another quantity is the same, Q3. So you will quantity keeps on what? Price is what? Held what? Particular case. Remember, the price elasticity that we are saying percentage change in what? Quantity demanded all over percentage in what? Remember, percentage change in quantity will be there as a figure divided by percentage change in price. And percentage change in price will be what? Will be zero, because price is held what? Constant, as you can see. Price is constant, it's fixed. So here, our overall elasticity, okay, would near what? Infinity. And what perfect is the demand curve for perfectly comparative, in perfectly comparative of this particular, we will use this particular curve to do a lot of exercise. So we're dealing with this one in subsequent sessions, not necessarily when we are doing the market structures. Now, how do you differentiate between perfectly elastic and perfectly inelastic? Look at this. This is perfectly inelastic. So the demand curve tends to be straight like this. Inelastic. Are you seeing? So inelastic. So this is how the demand curve is. So that is how you differentiate between the two. Now, to conclude, I know I still have some few minutes. So to conclude, let's look at elasticity and total revenue. This is the last session for elasticity and total revenue. At what point should you, as a seller, increase your price? Now, it depends on what will be the effect on your total revenue. If you want to increase revenue, should you increase your price or should you reduce your price? Whether to increase your price or decrease your price depends on the type of elasticity your product is. Now, let's look at one. In the case where we are talking about what? Elasticity is than one. If for your good is elastic, what is elasticity and total revenue? Will you lose revenue or will you gain revenue? Now, if you have an elastic demand, remember, this is what? Price. This is quantity. If you have elastic demand, remember this is how the demand curve looks like. Now, if price is here, P1, what will be the demand? Demand is here, Q1. So in this case, remember, total revenue is what? Price times what? Times quantity as the total revenue, which means that your total revenue at P1 will be what? This session. Total revenue will be this session. Now, because you are a seller, you want to make more money. You say, no, let me increase the price a bit and see what will happen because I want more money. Then the seller, so here you have what? Total revenue 1, which will be what? Price 1 here times quantity what? Times quantity 1. This is quantity times quantity 1. This is the total revenue, the one I shaded in red. But the seller decided to increase price to P2 just a little bit to make more revenue. Once you increase it, remember, quantity will fall. By how much? Remember, so we have this as the demand curve, then you come down. This as the supply, the quantity demanded. So you realize that quantity demanded will fall as a result of the marginal increase in what? Price. So what is going to happen? Yes, the seller will gain some revenue. So the new revenue, okay, which is revenue 2, would be what? The new price of P2 times the new quantity of what? Of Q2. You realize that the new revenue would now be this side. Would be this side. Would be this side. What can you see? The seller has gained some revenue. And what is that part of the revenue the seller has gained? Is this side. Remember, this particular side of the revenue the seller has gained. So this side is, let me say, revenue gain. Revenue gain, RG. So this side wasn't there, and it came on board as a result of the increase in price. But you realize that the seller has also at the same time lost this side of the revenue. The seller at the same time lost this side of the revenue. So this is revenue what? Loss, RL. So if you compare RL and RG, which one is more than the other? How much is being lost in revenue? Okay, so this side is R1, R2, that's the new one, and this side is what? R1, the whole side. So this side is R1, the old revenue, and then this side is the new revenue. So you realize that R1, you realize that R1, which is the what? The old revenue, is what? Is more than R2. That's the new revenue. In other words, the revenue that you will lose, which is RL, would be more than the revenue that you will gain. So overall, you realize that the seller, okay, the overall revenue will what? Will fall because the revenue what you will gain. That is if and only if the demand for your product is what? Is elastic. So before you increase your price as a seller, you should know the type of what elasticity your product is. If it is effect reduce. Now let's look at the second part. So the second part, if elasticity is less than 1, it means it is what? It is inelastic. So in this case, we are looking at this price quantity. So if you have this demand, now our price is this E1. So this will be the quantity demanded. So total revenue one will be this one. So this is total revenue one. So total revenue to one. Now he has decided to increase the price to P2. So what will happen to quantity? Quantity will fall to what? To Q2. You see price has increased, quantity has what? Has fallen. Quantity has fallen. So total revenue two would be price of two, the new price times what? Quantity. So our total revenue would now be, so total revenue would now be what? This side. Would now be this side. So you realize that this side is the total revenue two, and this side is the total revenue one. The seller has lost this side of the revenue. The seller has lost this side of the revenue. The seller has lost this side of the revenue, as you can see. And at the same time, the seller has gained this side of the revenue. The seller has gained this side of the revenue. So you realize that the revenue lost here is what? Less than the revenue what? Gain. Or you could as well just say the revenue gain is more than the revenue lost, which means that the overall effect on your total revenue will what? Will be higher. Which means if your good is inelastic, if the demand for your good is inelastic, total revenue will increase if you increase price. Total revenue will continue to increase if you increase price. Or total revenue will also fall if you decrease price. But for the first one, if they want to increase revenue, for instance, if the demand for your product is elastic, if you decrease revenue by 0.001, your overall revenue will increase because this side will now be revenue gain. And this side will now be what? Revenue lost. Okay, so you will be gaining more if you reduce your price. That is, if the demand for your good is what? Elastic. But for the inelastic, you will lose revenue if you decrease what? Price by even 0.001%. Now the third one, which is what? Unitary elastic, which means elasticity being equal to 1. We say it is what? Unitary elastic. In this particular case, we are going to have quantity here. Yes?
Our time is up.
This is the last one. Yes, this is the last one. So in this case, we will have something like this. So your total revenue would be here, quantity, price. This is the total revenue, okay? So total revenue one will be P1, Q1. Then if you increase price to P2, this is what you will have, Q2. So total revenue two would be P2, Q2. So in this case, you will notice that the revenue gain here would be the same as the revenue what? Will be the same as the revenue lost. So your total revenue will remain and what? Will remain unchanged. And the other special ones will also have their, their relative effects. For the perfectly inelastic demand, okay, the seller will always increase revenue if they continue to increase what price. But for the perfectly elastic one, in the case of a perfectly competitive market, your overall revenue will be zero, even if you increase price by 0.0001%. Any question? So please know this dynamics. Know this dynamics. So next week we are looking at completely different topic. Next week we most likely going to finish one topic and do another topic. So next week we are going to begin with theory of production. We are doing theory of production, and I'm hoping we will finish with that and then do the next one. Any question?
Thank you. No, there's no question because they are hungry and they want to eat.
They are what? They are hungry?
Yeah, they are hungry and they want to eat. So, but there's no question actually. Yeah.
Okay, so as usual, I was
So
saying
you've
that
used 2 hours and some minutes. We have given you your time exactly.